9:42 outside Chasiv Yar, eastern Ukraine. The horizon flashes white, then orange, then the sound arrives. Russian BM-21 Grad rockets tear across the sky in packs, shrieking over broken apartment blocks before slamming into the city ahead. Windows disappear, roof tiles jump, dust boils out of streets that barely qualify as streets anymore. And behind the barrage, diesel engines begin to growl. A Russian armored column moves forward. One tank leads. Several Tiger infantry mobility vehicles follow behind it, spread apart to avoid presenting Ukrainian artillery with the military equivalent of an all-you-can-eat buffet. Their mission is straightforward: drive in, reach the drop-off sector, dump infantry, push deeper. Except Ukrainian soldiers are already waiting. And several of them are holding long green tubes manufactured roughly 2,000 kilometers away in Sweden. The Russians do not know that yet. The column enters the approach. The lead tank rolls over churned soil, turrets searching through the haze. Its crew has survived artillery, mines, drones, probably several briefings involving arrows on maps that no longer resemble the actual battlefield. Then the ground underneath it erupts. Mine strike. The tank jerks violently. Its forward momentum disappears. Behind it, a Tiger swerves. Another vehicle tries to push through. Ukrainian artillery begins dropping around the formation. One shell lands long, another short. Then one lands close enough to turn the road into a brown wall of dirt and fragments. The carefully spaced Russian assault immediately becomes less carefully spaced. Drivers accelerate, infantry brace against doors, radio traffic spikes. And from concealed Ukrainian positions, optics follow every meter. Nobody fires yet. That is the difficult part: waiting. Because an anti-tank weapon fired too early is just a very expensive announcement saying, "Hello, we're over here." 10:13. First vehicle enters the kill zone. A Russian Tiger pushes closer. A Ukrainian soldier shoulders a Swedish anti-armor launcher. The sight settles. Trigger. Whoosh. The projectile crosses the short distance in seconds. It lands just off target. Dust erupts beside the vehicle. The Tiger keeps moving. For approximately one heartbeat, the Russians receive something dangerously close to hope. Then the vehicle stops. Bad decision. A second Ukrainian shooter already has an angle. This one carries an AT-4. Simple, disposable, no dramatic computer screens, no giant missile tripod. Just a tube, a sight, and a very immediate engineering disagreement with armored vehicles. Shooter fires. The projectile strikes high. Tiger jolts. The roof area takes the hit. Smoke bursts upward. Inside the Ukrainian position, nobody celebrates. There are still more vehicles coming. At 10:16 hours, another Tiger reaches the sector. Its driver sees what happens ahead. Smoke grenades deploy. A white curtain blooms around the vehicle. For a second, the battlefield vanishes. Russian doctrine says smoke breaks observation. Unfortunately, smoke does not make several tons of armored vehicles cease to exist. The Ukrainians fire again. AT-4. Impact. The blast punches against the armor. This time, the vehicle survives the immediate strike. Damaged, still moving, very much interested in becoming somebody else's problem. Its infantry dismount and sprint toward a building. Tiger turns away. The Russians inside the structure probably consider the walls comforting. The Ukrainian fire begins hitting the building. Small arms, grenade launchers, everything available. The walls start shedding masonry. The Russians reconsider the real estate market and leave. They race toward the tree line. Behind them, their armored transport is crawling away with visible damage. Shrapnel has reached the engine. The vehicle slows. Slower, slower. Stops. The assault is collapsing one machine at a time. And then the drone arrives, because apparently being shot at by Swedish anti-tank weapons is not enough paperwork for one afternoon. A Ukrainian unmanned aircraft catches the infantry near the tree line. The surviving Russians scatter. The attack that begins as a mechanized push now looks like an individual man trying to become invisible underneath branches. Several surrender. Others do not make it back. The armored spearhead is finished, and the Swedish launch tubes remain in Ukrainian hands. Empty now, but definitely not unemployed. Different position, same problem. Near Petrivka, in the Kharkiv region, foreign volunteers prepare defensive positions. Artillery rumbles in the distance. The mood is strangely casual. That happens in war. Human beings can adapt to almost anything, including explosions becoming background noise. Let me know in the comments below if any of y'all sleep to war background noise. Men knock down a fence to improve their firing position. Someone checks an NLAW. Another soldier watches the approach. Reconnaissance reports Russian movement from the north. The defenders settle in. Then somebody sees it. Russian APC, moving toward them. Voices sharpen instantly. Direction is called. The NLAW gunner shoulders the launcher. The world narrows. Vehicle, reticle, distance, movement. The system tracks the target. Seconds stretch. The APC continues forward, completely unaware that a Swedish-designed missile is currently considering its roof geometry. The gunner fires. The missile jumps from the tube. For a fraction of a second, it seems almost casual. Then it accelerates toward the vehicle. Impact. A hard flash. Smoke. The soldiers shout over one another. The APC is hit. The mood changes immediately from tension to pure adrenaline. Someone asks if the missile connects. Someone else is already watching for another vehicle. Because combat never allows a victory lap. It barely allows punctuation. Another Ukrainian position. Empty launch tubes cover the ground. That tells the story before the camera does. NLAWs, AT-4s, spent weapons lying in dirt. The fight is already deep into its violent arithmetic. Down the road, a Russian tank sits opposite the Ukrainian position. The distance is close enough that nobody requires a PowerPoint presentation explaining the danger. Shots crack out. Then something changes inside the tank. Smoke thickens, flame appears, and suddenly the ammunition starts detonating. The vehicle turns into its own ammunition depot. Internal explosions punch through the hull. Fire rolls upward. The turret area disappears inside smoke. The Ukrainian soldiers react with the kind of screaming that only appears when fear and relief collide at full speed. 1 second earlier, a Russian tank owns the road. Now the road owns a burning Russian tank. Swedish engineering won. Several $1 million of armed optimism, considerably less. Close inspection. Later, a Ukrainian soldier walks around the wreckage of another armored vehicle. The camera approaches the impact point. There's a hole through the armor. Not a dent, not scratch paint, a hole. The important thing about armor is that everybody loves discussing its thickness until somebody attacks it from somewhere it is thin. That principle sits at the heart of the NLAW's most dangerous trick. Russian tanks carry their strongest protection where designers expect the enemy, usually the front, the glacis, the turret face, but the roof cannot carry the same mass. Every extra ton has consequences: mobility, suspension, fuel, transport. So the roof remains comparatively vulnerable, and the Swedish-designed weapon is built to take advantage. Open ground. The city disappears behind the camera. Now there are fields, tree lines, long sight lines, very little cover. This is the sort of terrain where armored columns are supposed to breathe easier. Before drones dominate every meter overhead, Ukrainian anti-tank teams hide along these approaches with NLAWs. Ahead, another Russian column appears. First vehicle. The Ukrainian gunner tracks. Launch. The missile races out. Impact. The first target stops. The second vehicle keeps coming. Another NLAW leaves its tube. Second impact. Another armored vehicle falls out of formation. Then the third. Another launch, another strike. The column is no longer maneuvering. It is being processed, one vehicle at a time. And this is where the Swedish weapon becomes particularly unpleasant. The next missile appears to pass over its target. For anyone watching without knowing how the weapon operates, it looks wrong. Too high. Miss. Except it's not a miss. It's exactly where the missile wants to be, above the vehicle. The NLAW's overfly-attack concept allows the munition to attack the vulnerable upper portion of the armored target, rather than trying to win a fistfight with the strongest frontal armor. The missile crosses over the turret. Then the warhead functions. A violent downward strike tears into the thinner top armor. Inside, the effect is catastrophic. Hot fragments, pressure, equipment, ammunition, crew compartment, everything that makes a tank work occupies a very confined steel box. and confined steel boxes become extremely unfriendly places when somebody punches an explosive jet through the ceiling. The Russian column freezes, vehicles stop, crews lose coordination. The road becomes blocked by their own wrecks. This is the ugly secret of anti-tank warfare. You do not necessarily need to destroy every vehicle. Kill the first, kill the last, damage enough in the middle. Suddenly, a column stops being a maneuver formation. It becomes traffic, and traffic is much easier to shoot. But Swedish weapons are not only waiting in ambush. A Ukrainian Humvee tears across rough ground. The vehicle bounces hard enough to rearrange vertebrae. Its gunner works the machine gun from the top. Burst, burst, burst. The objective is not elegance, it is suppression. Keep Russian troops down. Prevent anyone from calmly raising an anti-tank weapon and turning the Humvee into a very expensive aluminum bonfire. The gunner keeps firing. Then, silence. Machine gun empty. That sound is worse than gunfire because everyone hears it, including the enemy. The driver continues pushing across the terrain. The crew scrambles for ammunition. No belt, no immediate reload. And somewhere ahead, Russian troops suddenly have the one thing soldiers always want during an attack: a few uninterrupted seconds. The Humvee crew refuses to give them those seconds. The gunner grabs an AT-4. Not just any configuration, a confined space variant designed to reduce the brutal backblast problem that normally makes firing a rocket launcher from a vehicle interior an excellent method of fighting your own crew. He shoots it from the vehicle. The Humvee is still moving. The driver is fighting the terrain. The machine gun remains dead. The gunner aims, fires, boom! The projectile slams toward the Russian position. Suppression resumes instantly, except now the suppressive weapon happens to carry considerably more attitude. The driver searches for ammunition while controlling the vehicle. Still nothing. The gunner grabs another AT-4, because when the primary weapon goes empty, the correct Ukrainian solution apparently involves producing another Swedish tube from somewhere. He rises, aims, second launch, another explosion. Those shots buy time. Not much, but enough. 30 seconds on a battlefield can be an eternity. The machine gun gets ammunition. The main weapon comes alive again. The Humvee keeps moving. Crew intact, attack intact. And two disposable Swedish launchers have just bridged the gap between temporary malfunction and everyone inside gets killed. Then comes the trophy target, Russian T-90. The name carries weight. Modern armor, advanced protection, a machine promoted as something approaching battlefield royalty. The sort of vehicle that appears in military parades looking immaculate while announcers discuss survivability in deep voices. Ukraine is considerably less interested in the brochure. A Swedish Carl Gustaf is brought into the fight. Unlike the disposable AT-4, the Carl Gustaf is a reusable, recoilless weapon system. Old concept, constantly updated, still extremely relevant. The operator lines up the Russian tank. There is no orchestra, no heroic slow motion, just another armored target, another sight picture, another calculation. Fire. The round streaks toward the T-90. Impact. Flame tears across the vehicle. Smoke pours upward. The machine stops. One multi-million-dollar tank now sits beside the road as blackened evidence that marketing departments do not receive veto power over physics. And that might be the most important point in the entire story. Ukraine is not defeating Russian army with one magical superweapon. There is no single tube that automatically wins a war. Instead, the battlefield becomes a layered system. Mines stop movement. Artillery forces vehicles into predictable paths. Infantry wait inside ruins. Reconnaissance watches approaches. Drones chase survivors. And Swedish anti-tank weapons fill the lethal space between them. NLAW handles armored targets at close range with a highly dangerous attack profile. AT-4 gives infantry a fast disposable option when a vehicle suddenly appears. Carl Gustaf offers a reusable system with the flexibility to keep fighting. Different weapons, different circumstances, same deeply inconvenient morning for Russian armored crews. Zoom out. Early in the invasion, Russian doctrine places enormous faith in massed armor. Columns, tanks, APCs, mobility, shock. Drive fast enough, push hard enough, and defenders break. But Ukrainian infantry demonstrate an old military truth with very modern equipment. A tank is terrifying when nobody can stop it. Once every basement, tree line, window, and ditch can conceal an anti-tank weapon, the equation changes. Armor still matters. It remains powerful. It protects soldiers. It delivers firepower. But now every kilometer becomes a question. Is somebody watching? Is that ruined building empty? Is the tree line clear? Is there an NLAW behind that wall? An AT-4 inside that trench? A Carl Gustaf waiting around the corner? The psychological effect travels ahead of the weapon itself. Russian crews spread out. Movement slows. Infantry dismount earlier. Columns lose momentum. And every slowdown creates more time for Ukrainian artillery and drones to arrive. That is how a relatively small shoulder-fired weapon begins influencing something far larger than the vehicle it hits. It changes behavior. Final tally. The battlefield is covered in the evidence. Burned APCs, abandoned Tigers, tanks with open hatches, empty Swedish launch tubes, drone footage, roads blocked by destroyed armor. None of the launchers look particularly glamorous afterward. Most are scratched, dirty, some are discarded the moment their job is complete. But glamour is not the metric. The metric is whether the armored vehicle on the other end still functions, and repeatedly it does not. Sweden sends compact weapons built around very simple logic. Infantry should not need a tank to kill a tank. Ukraine takes that logic and plugs it into an increasingly sophisticated battlefield network of reconnaissance, artillery, drones, and mobile infantry. The result is brutal. Russian armor enters thinking it is the hunter. A few seconds later, somebody in a ditch presses a trigger and the food chain gets revised. Chasiv Yar. Smoke hangs over the road. The damaged Russian Tiger is motionless. The infantry it carries are scattered. The Ukrainian position remains active. A soldier lowers an empty Swedish launcher and reaches for another weapon. Nothing about the scene looks ceremonial. There is no parade, no speech, no polished defense industry video. Just mud, broken concrete, burning armor. And a weapon tube from Sweden lying in the dirt after doing exactly what it crosses Europe to do. The Russian column comes looking for a breakthrough. Instead, it finds NLAW, AT-4, Carl Gustaf. Then this happens. The armor burns, the infantry hold, and somewhere in Sweden, an engineer probably deserves a very expensive beer. Bye for now.